Imagine a room full of men laughing. Not polite laughter, not nervous laughter, the kind of laughter that only comes when people believe they are untouchable. It's the spring of 1854, deep in the American South. Cotton prices are strong, the land is rich, and the men sitting around this long oak table, planters, lawyers, local politicians, are convinced history itself belongs to them. They're drinking brandy, talking about horses, talking about money. And then someone makes a joke, a cruel joke, a joke about a woman who doesn't even know she's the punchline. She works in the kitchen of a nearby plantation. She cooks every meal these men praise and devour. She wakes before dawn, works until her hands ache, and falls asleep exhausted beside the fire. She is enslaved. She is black. And yes, she is overweight, which in that room becomes the excuse for mockery. Someone laughs and says, "You know what would be the finest entertainment this county's ever seen?" The men lean in. And then it's said, "What if one of us married her?" The room explodes. Laughter slaps on the table. Someone nearly spills his drink. Marriage to them is a symbol of status, purity, lineage. And this woman, this enslaved cook, is everything their society says a wife should never be. The joke escalates. A bet is proposed. Real money, serious money. $1,000, then two, then more. Finally, all eyes turn to one man, a wealthy plantation owner known for his arrogance, his temper, and his absolute confidence that nothing could ever truly harm him. He smiles. "I'll do it," he says. The laughter stops. He repeats it. "I'll marry her, legally, in front of witnesses, and I'll keep her as my wife for a full year." Someone asks if he's drunk. He isn't. Someone asks if he's serious. He is. And just like that, a woman's life, already controlled in every way, becomes a game played by men who think they already know how the story ends. But they are wrong. Very wrong. Because the South was about to witness something it could not laugh off. And once it began, there was no turning back. The woman at the center of this story, let's call her Hannah, as she's referred to in several later accounts, had been born into slavery around 1825. She had never known freedom. She had never known choice. But she was known for something: her cooking. People traveled miles to eat at that plantation. Guests praised the meals with the same enthusiasm they used for expensive French restaurants in New Orleans. Some said she had magic in her hands. What no one said out loud, but many knew, was that Hannah was also intelligent, observant, quiet in a way that made people underestimate her. When the plantation owner informed her she was to be married, Hannah assumed it was another form of control, another cruelty dressed up as novelty. She was not told about the bet. She was not told she was the punchline. She was simply told to prepare. The wedding itself was small, stiff, and deeply uncomfortable. A white man of wealth, an enslaved black woman, standing together while polite society looked on in disbelief. Some refused to attend. Others came purely to witness what they believed would become gossip for decades. And then something happened that no one expected. The plantation owner did not laugh. Not at the ceremony, not afterwards, not in the days that followed. At first, people assumed he was simply committed to the performance. After all, a bet required discipline. But then he did something that shook the local order. He moved Hannah into the main house, not the servants' quarters, not the kitchen wing, the master bedroom. And he ordered the staff, many of whom had known Hannah for years, to address her as Mrs. Whispers spread fast. Some said it was part of the humiliation. Others said it was a calculated insult to his peers. A few began to worry he'd gone too far. But the real shock came weeks later. He began asking her opinion at the table, about meals, about household expenses, about land use. Men who visited the plantation noticed something strange. Hannah listened more than she spoke, but when she did speak, he listened, really listened. By summer, laughter had turned to discomfort. By fall, discomfort turned to anger. Because Hannah was no longer just existing in a role meant to be temporary, she was changing the household. She reorganized food storage and reduced waste. She adjusted meal planning and cut costs. She noticed which workers were sick, exhausted, or injured and said something about it. Productivity increased. Profits rose. And the plantation owner, once loud and cruel, grew quieter, thoughtful, observant. People began to ask a dangerous question. What if this wasn't a joke anymore? Then came the night that truly shocked the South. At a public gathering, a man made a comment about Hannah's body, loud, cruel, meant to provoke laughter. The plantation owner stood up, and he struck him hard. Silence fell. No white man struck another white man over an enslaved woman, ever. He declared in front of everyone, "You will speak of my wife with respect or not at all." That single sentence spread faster than any newspaper. And now the bet, once funny, had become terrifying. Because if he truly saw her as his wife, the implications were enormous, legally, socially, morally. As the year drew closer to its end, the men who had funded the bet grew nervous. They expected a conclusion, a reveal, a punchline. They wanted him to cast her aside, free her quietly, or sell her, or send her away. Instead, he did something that set off a firestorm. He filed papers to manumit her, to free her, not after the year, immediately. That act alone was enough to ruin reputations. But he didn't stop there. He amended his will. Hannah was named a beneficiary. A white planter leaving property to a formerly enslaved black woman, his wife, was unthinkable. Church leaders condemned him, neighbors shunned him, business partners withdrew. The same men who once laughed now called him insane. And Hannah, she did not gloat. She did not boast. She continued running the household with quiet authority. And then, less than 2 years after the wedding, the plantation owner fell ill, very ill. Rumors flew, as rumors always do. Poison, curses, divine punishment. But records suggest something far simpler. Years of excess, alcohol, stress, guilt. On his deathbed, he asked for Hannah. Witnesses later said his last words were spoken to her alone. When he died, the will was read, and the South erupted. Hannah inherited land, money, and, most shocking of all, legal protection few black women had in that era. Some of the property was contested, some was taken through legal loopholes, but not all of it. Hannah left the county within a year, and she was never seen there again. What happened to her afterwards is unclear. Some say she opened a boarding house in the North. Others say she joined abolitionist circles. A few claim she lived quietly, finally free, never speaking of the past. But the legend endured. Not because a cruel bet was made, but because it failed. Because the men who believed they controlled every outcome discovered something they refused to accept. That even in a system built on dehumanization, humanity could still break through. And that the greatest shock wasn't the marriage, it was the transformation. The joke didn't destroy her, it exposed them. And that's why this story, whether told in whispers, newspapers, or half-forgotten memoirs, still unsettles people today. Because it asks an uncomfortable question.
If a system is so fragile that one unexpected act of recognition can shake it, what does that say about the system? And what does it say about the people who laughed? If this kind of hidden history fascinates you, stories that challenge what we think we know, subscribe to the channel because there are many more that were never meant to be remembered, and yet they refuse to disappear.